right. Hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Happy Hump Day. Thanks for being here today. I'm Allison Boyer, Director of the CTL, and I am thrilled to have everyone here today for this awesome collaboration that we've got going with the COAT team. And we've got some excellent faculty members and the director of the ELC here today to talk a little bit about teaching teamwork. So I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Sarah Fish, who's one of the co-chairs of the COAT team, and she'll get things set up for us, and then we'll go from there. Sarah?
I also want to say thank you for being here, and to my panelists, and Allison, thank you for helping to facilitate this. This is the first of its kind to kind of push forward core objectives and how this work kind of can be built into classes. And we started really with teamwork because I think of all of the core objectives, it's one that kind of gives all of us collectively like the heebie-jeebies, like, how do I do this? How do I survive the process? How do I create an environment where my students can do this and do it well? What kind of training we might have gotten in presenting collaborative projects and teamwork might be limited. So we thought we'd start here because it is both a core objective, it's a foundational component area, and it's a 21st century marketable skill. So across those kind of three big terms for the state of Texas, it's a space where we really kind of have to inhabit. So I've asked our three presenters here today because I've heard really good things about things they do for teamwork in their classes. And they're also willing to share things that didn't quite work. And I asked our ELC director to be here too, because the big question for us is, how do we do this in Canvas? How might we do this with a face-to-face class in Canvas, or if we have a hybrid class or an online class? So what tools might we have in our LMS that will bring this together? So I appreciate that you all are here, and I hope to learn a little bit. I do have to say, if you have any questions for me, you can send them to me in email. It's sfish@collin.edu. I do have to dip out at about 1:50 because I have a 2 o'clock class. So any COAT Q&A, you can ask me. I see Irene is in the chat or in the group too. So Irene actually would be a really good person to ask and answer questions. I don't mean to put you on the spot also, Irene, but if you have any follow-up, please just let me know. We're here to help as best we can.
All right, I don't know if you had plans for who wants to present first. Rachel, you have a PowerPoint. Do you want to go first?
I do. Let's see if I can pull this up here. Okay. Can we see that? Give me a head nod.
Yep.
Thank you. All right, so I was asked to present on kind of how we work teamwork into the classroom, and to not focus on specific assignments that might give you COAT artifacts, but how we kind of work this throughout the semester, trying to get these things incorporated into our classes. So I'm going to give you a couple different ideas here, and I'm trying to break it down to something very simple that you could use in your classroom. I'm a history professor, but obviously not all of us are. So there's hopefully ways that you can work this into your classes as well. When I was a graduate assistant in grad school, I had a professor who talked about how to chat with students and to organize things to try to like get them involved in the class. And she came up with two big ones that she always tried to do. And one was to pit the students against the professor. And she would, even outside of major assignments and things, she would do this with students. So she was not from Texas, and this was at Texas A&M, so she'd pick on the football team so that all the Aggies would kind of want to work together to, you know, pick on her back and such. But it created a bit of camaraderie amongst the students, and it got them involved in a way that maybe they weren't before she kind of started that. The other way I try to get at this is literally to pit students against each other and give them kind of some back and forth where, you know, they want to win over that other team. They want to convince that other team of whatever they're doing. And then of course, the hardest one I think for any of us to do is to get the students as a group working with us, right? And to get like the class working as a team. So I'm gonna give you 3 examples of kind of how I have tried to put these into effect in my classroom. And hopefully there's something in there that will be useful for all of you. So this is an activity I start when which students end up pitted against each other, and they don't realize it when we start this. So this is an early in the semester activity. I pass out these two sheets. So there's two pieces of paper here. Both have primary sources on them from the time period of the Boston Massacre. What the students don't know is that half of them have one sheet, half have the other. Half of their sources blame the British soldiers for the event, and half of them blame the colonists. So I put the slide up that you can see here, and basically say you each have a series of eyewitness accounts of March 5th, 1770, and I want you to figure out who fired the first shot and why. Did Captain Preston give that order, and who was primarily responsible? And so they're supposed to go through their sheets and underline and highlight when they find their evidence. And so I asked the first question, okay, well, who was responsible? And I do by show of hands. And the first thing we get at is, do we have an open mind? Are we following our sources? Because if you came out of high school history, then, you know, most of my students are going to blame British soldiers for the Boston Massacre. And if 90% of my students are blaming them, but only 50% have sources that blame them, then we can talk about sources and such. But most of the time, they're a little more open-minded. They're following the sources I give them. And so we get into kind of a back and forth, right? Okay, what bit of evidence do you have that Preston gave the order? What bit do you have that he didn't? And so the two sides of the room end up kind of arguing back and forth with evidence. And it's surprising how quickly the group who is, you know, listening but not agreeing kind of jumps in on the first student who's bold enough to raise their hand and offer a suggestion or a piece of evidence. When I first did this, it was a little difficult to get the discussion going and regulated because I did every other student. So this student had the British soldier version, this one had the colonial version, and back and forth. I have learned since to put all of my British soldier sources on one side of the room and all of my colonist blame sources on the other, so that I have a real clear division of like who's on which team, so I can help moderate that activity. It tends to work pretty well, and it gives students a kind of a glimpse into primary sources and that they don't all agree with each other, that they do have to be taken with a grain of salt. So I like that one in part just because the students tend to get pretty impressive about arguing with each other over these sources. This one is a fun one. In this one, I'm pitting students against me. So I tell the students, we're coming up to the Declaration of Independence, and everybody says the DOI is a breakup letter. So I tell them I need them to help me write a breakup letter, but not just any breakup letter. I need them to write a breakup letter knowing that their soon-to-be ex is going to show this letter to their group of mutual friends because they know what that person's like. And their job is to write a letter that's going to convince their friends to stay friends with us and not stay friends with our soon-to-be ex. And so that's the goal. And as the students begin reading these letters and giving me ideas for them, I become kind of the adversary saying, I'm not sure. I don't think I would stay friends with you if you wrote that in a letter. I don't think I would stay friends with that person. So when they start writing the letter, they'll say things like, it's not me, it's you. I'm like, well, if it's not, you know, them, it's you, then I'm going to stay friends with them. And so we do get a little adversarial as the class is trying to come up with the best breakup letter that's going to make them sound good and convince me in the role of their friends here to stay friends with them. So this is one they did last week. Dear Jordan, this is not going to work out. I expect communication, but I get the cold shoulder. So we always talk about expectations and then how you're not meeting them. You're always reading my text and looking at my phone. You don't trust me. You're so controlling. You're alienating me from my friends. This one made me laugh. I feel like you're just using me for my Netflix password. It's been fun, but it's best to part ways. And then, of course, they know where we're going with this. It becomes a Declaration of Independence in which we're trying to convince France and Spain to stay friends with the United States, even as the colonies break up with Great Britain. So it's a lot of fun. The students get pretty into it. But there is kind of that adversarial aspect of they've got to convince me. Right? I'm not convinced by this suggestion. So they get pretty creative with it, which is a lot of fun. And then, of course, anyone who's seen me present at these types of things knows that I'm a huge fan of Perusal, which we all have access to in Canvas. In fact, it's a little easier to use now than it was before. So this is just how I set up Perusal. It's an online collective e-reader, so all of their readings are in Perusal. It tracks as they read. So it literally gives them credit for reading the source And I put them in groups so that we are reading it together with each other. The big thing with perusal, I think, is you don't just assign it to students and let them do the reading in their groups. You read it along with them. You chime in on their conversations. And it really begins to kind of pull the group in and let them know that you're kind of in it with them. And they can rely on their group members when they have questions, but they can also tag me in if they need to. So this is a perusal reading with primary and secondary sources that are just, a couple pages each. And as they scroll through, they'll see those 5 sources in this reading. And if we come over here, so they're reading in the Journal of Christopher Columbus, and this person writes this particular text to ask this question. And so I get to jump in and answer it for them as they're reading it. If they read it at 2 o'clock in the morning, they're gonna have to wait a little bit for my answer. But for the most part, if it's during the day and I'm at my computer, I can jump in and answer those questions for them. They can also just leave it as a question and not tag me. And that way their group members know they're curious about this. They really do want an answer. So these are some of the questions that can get asked and how we can have conversations back and forth. I did cover up the students' icons, so you can't see that those are actually 2 different students. That's their little group talking with me. But you get a lot of good conversations this way. They engage with the text in a different way. And because they're in the smaller groups, they end up forming almost like study groups with each other, which especially in an online class, because it is set up asynchronously, it's pretty hard to do, but they end up making these connections with their group that works really well for the online section. Oops, I went one too far there. So they do get this back and forth, and oftentimes I don't have to jump in the conversation, but it works kind of like on social media where you can like a comment. So they call it upvoting. So it tells them that this was upvoted by the instructor, so that I'm reading their conversation, I'm still in it with them, and they're on the right track. Like, these are good comments. So they get upvoted and kind of know that I'm still in there with them in their groups. More discussions like this. They didn't tag me in here. They're just kind of going back and forth about the material. And their main point here is to find the thesis of each of the smaller readings. What's the big argument there? And so some students struggle with that, struggle with finding the argument in a historical piece as opposed to just reading everything as fact. So the group work helps them kind of point those things out. So that is my time.
Does anybody have any questions they want to ask Rachel before we move on to our next expert presenter? If not, I'll just want to let you all know I'll monitor the chat. And so if questions arise for any of our attendees while you're presenting, I'll keep an eye on them, and then I'll pose them to you at an opportune time, if that sounds okay.
Rachel, Andy Baker, I'd like to say, it's a great, I never thought of that. That's a great idea, because it's a topic the students are familiar with. That's what I like to give. It's something they know and they can write about. And it sounds challenging, something really challenging. So I'm gonna think about this one.
If you like the particular Boston Massacre slides or the Declaration of Independence activity, I've got like the slides and instructions on my website. So I'm always happy to send those out to anyone who wants to use them.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Cooper, you want to go next?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good.
All right, cool. One of the things I was going to say as well, I like that with where you're kind of pinning the class against each other, kind of like one half and the other half, having them do different things, but not telling them that they are, because they'll start listening to the other team to see what direction they're going in. And so, when they have different goals, different questions and things, like, they kind of give up on that. And they're like, guess I need to focus on what I'm supposed to be focusing on, which is my team and what I'm doing. So that's super cool. I've got kind of a collection of things to lead more towards generically just the struggle of having to build teams and try and get them to actually work as a team. And then when there's issues with the team and things like that, there's 2 books, because I took a class in grad school that was all about collaborative teaching. And so while we were taking that class, we also had to do collaborative work. So we were doing the work that we were learning how to teach. And so the main book that we used is called Team Writing by Joanna Wolf. And it's got a lot of really great stuff in it that I still use today. And then we also used Engaging Ideas by Bean. I think Dr. Fish is familiar with this one. It's a pretty big one with writing pedagogy. But there's a section in there as well about teamwork and team writing. But the thing with this is, you know, I teach English, but a lot of the English scholarship on teamwork in the classroom, it would work in most classrooms because it's more about things like, what do you do when there's an issue with the team? What do you do when there's someone that's doing all the work like that? And that would work, I think, in any type of class. So I think one of the first things to think about is like, why do you have teams? Why are you trying to integrate them into your classroom? Is it just for one assignment? Is this going to be something that they do all semester long? Is this something that you're going to kind of fall back on every few weeks, like get with your teams? Because if it's just like a one and done type scenario just for that day, then maybe building the teams is something as simple as 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But if you're trying to do something that's more long term, then it's really worth putting the extra effort in to try to build teams that will actually be productive. So one thing to think of is like, whatever your purpose is for the teams, that's going to help determine how big those teams are. And of course, as we know, a lot of them come in with their friends or people they were in past classes with, and they want to be with those, you know, friends. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. And so a big part is paying attention those first few weeks of class and paying attention to personalities. You know, sometimes I can let friends be in a team together because they'll actually help bring in other people, whereas others I've got my little seating chart and, you know, we're all trying to figure out ways to remember their names. Guy with red hair, right? Dude that wears blue hat and then he doesn't wear the hat again. And so the notes that I'm taking, they're helping me remember their names, but part of those notes are also helping me get a feel for their personalities and their likes and their dislikes so that when we do certain things throughout the semester, I can try to include them in a way that kind of helps, but then it also helps me create teams. So let me check out my notes real quick. You know, you've got the students that are extra quiet or extra shy, and you've got the students that are really outspoken. So is the quiet student quiet because they just are thinking all the time and they're not talking, or is it because they're terrified to talk? Is the outspoken student, are they kind of steamrolling all of the other students because they're not self-aware? Or is this a leader that is waiting to see if anyone else is going to talk, and then they're like, okay, I guess we're going to talk again because no one's talking and the teacher looks sad. You know, the difference between those different types of personalities, I try to build teams based on that. So if there is a student, and then I might create teams based off of that. And, you know, from that experience, the most popular ones have been anime and music lately. So if half of the class puts their Post-its in anime, I already have some other categories to try and break that up. I'm like, all right, anime guys, do you like drama anime or fighting anime? And then I split them up that way. And the same with music. A lot of them are like, I'm just going to do music. That's easy. And so I've kind of got to be ready to split that up. And then when they get in their teams, it's a good thing to have them go ahead and talk about with one another. What is it you like about Stranger Things? When you get outside, what is it that you like to do? So they already have something that's kind of safe to talk about. Because that's another thing is once you build the teams, you have to kind of get them to connect with each other and not just kind of stare blankly at each other like, no, what? And so finding something that they can talk about that's kind of safe in the beginning so they can get to know each other so that when you actually do challenge them, they're not scared of each other anymore. So I have them talk about these preferences that they like or how they chose their teams. Something I actually did this semester is I had them talk about cults. We were talking about rhetoric and communication and argument, and I thought, well, this could be fun. This could be an interesting way. Like it's bizarre enough that most people are going to have some kind of an opinion, and there's not going to be too many in there that will have experienced it to be like, I'm triggered, I have to leave. So I do give them a trigger warning before. I'm like, hey, next class, we're going to talk about cults. So if that's a problem, just shoot me an email It's totally fine, but we'll figure something else out. They've never emailed me and been like, I can't talk about cults. And they do talk. You know, we watch a few videos on cults. We talk about some of the most deadly cults, and then I have them talk, and they do an assignment. And that way, this thing that gets them to connect as a team, they're getting credit for it somehow. And they have a lot of interesting things to say about cults. But I do remind them, I'm like, you never know, someone in here might actually have been part of one. So let's be a little bit, you know, self-aware and respectful, because you never know what you might be talking about when you're like, how could you be that stupid? And things like that. Like, you don't know everyone in this room, in this space. I also have, over the years, I've done competitions where they come up with team names, and that's the assignment. Is they come up with their name, and then for the next 2 weeks, I post them on social media, like the names. I ask my colleagues, and I get votes for their favorite one, and then whichever team wins, they get extra credit points or something. So they actually, some of them get real competitive, especially dual credit. Dual credit gets real competitive. But it gives them, again, it gives them something kind of playful to do. And then they like to refer back to those team names as we go throughout the semester. And then I think, how much time do I have?
You're doing fine.
Okay.
You've got plenty of time.
Okay, cool. So, you know, you build your teams with your purpose in mind. Along with the building the teams, the scholarship it technically says that the ideal team is made up of 5 to 6 students. Now that was from like 1993, I think, but I don't think it's that wrong still. They say when you have a team of 3, often you end up with 2 that pair up and 1 that's being left alone. When you have 4, they tend to separate into 2 different groups. 5 is pretty great. 6 is starting to kind of get risky. And also when they're too small, if 2 people happen to miss a day and you have 1 person just sitting there, that's awkward. And then they have to be the orphan person that joins another team. So you don't want to get too big, but also not too small. So you get them built, you get them connected so that they'll talk to each other. Then there's the step of organizing. And again, this is for long-term teams. Organizing and setting up the team, deciding who's going to do what, giving them each different roles. And the types of roles that they have, again, will be based off of what you're doing in your classroom with these teams. There's some that you'll probably always want. For instance, the project manager, right? This is kind of the leader. Sometimes I let them choose. Sometimes I just do it myself because I'm like, I already had a project manager in mind when I created these teams. But again, it depends on the personalities in the class. You want to have a note taker. You want to have a speaker. That way, when you're like, hey, Team Blue over there, what did y'all come up with? And they're all just crickets because they haven't decided who's going to talk. You're like, hello? You know, so they have a designated speaker. They have a designated communicator, not just communicating with one another, right? Setting up those study groups, or are we going to talk on text? Are we going to use Canvas messaging? They figure that out, but they also are the one that reaches out to the teacher when there's something that we need to know. They know the communicator is the one that's going to make sure and talk to the teacher. There's also having a doubter. I call them the asshole. So depending on what kind of thing they're doing, they're the person that's supposed to question everything. They're the one supposed to say, but this might not be good enough, and here's all the reasons. And, you know, they have fun with that too, because again, you don't want the actual asshole to be that person because they have a little too much fun with it. But you need someone that's going to push them to be better. And so having a designated person in the team that's like, let's make this better. Let's be a little bit contrary with our ideas so that we try a little bit harder. We're the devil's advocate. Yep, that one's good too. The contrarian, the naysayer. Right? Sometimes I tell them to come up with funny names, make them wear a mean hat or something. And then again, depending on what you're doing, maybe you have the person that does numbers, or the person that does the editing or the grammar, or the artsy person that does the designs. You know, that would work in some teams, that wouldn't work in others, because it's all about what they're supposed to be doing. And then something that I've done here a couple of times, this was a big thing in the collaborative teamwork scholarship in class, is how much you're going to let them decide. And so it's been extremely useful when I've done it, but when you've got an assignment they're going to be doing as a team, like a long-term assignment, and they're doing different pieces of it, I set up the pieces and I say, okay, well, this is going to be this part of the assignment, and then next week we'll do this other part, everything. I let them know some hard lines, like this has to be at least half of the grade. right? Or this has to be at least 30%, but then letting them as a team determine how much all the other parts of the assignment weigh towards the overall grade. They love that. And I have never had them be just totally crazy about the weights. They almost always still fall within what I wanted anyways. And it's really not that much extra work for you as the teacher to change it up so that each team's is maybe different, because they all vote and they all decide that that's what they want. It gives them some power over, you know, what they're doing in their grade in the classroom. And so they really like that. And then one of the last things is dealing with conflict. And so having different types of assignments to go ahead and kind of prepare for that. One of the biggest ones is having them grade themselves. And so not just having them grade themselves together, but having them have an overall, here's how I think we as a team worked and we deserve this grade, but then having them grade each other individually. And they have to give specific things that each team member did. What were the strengths? What were the weaknesses? And not so-and-so took notes. Okay, took notes on what? And how did she take notes when she missed 3 out of 5 days? That way they're not just lying for each other, trying, you know, cover up for one another. And when you've got teams of at least 5, that's how you can really start to tell when someone's doing all the work or someone's doing none of the work. You know, you can put all that together and start to figure it out. And so over the years, you know, students, they don't want to do teamwork. They don't want to do peer review. It's because of things like that. And so you go ahead and plan for that to be a problem. And so they go in not quite so nervous about it, except the ones that don't want to do any of the work. And they should be nervous. You know, and at the end of the day, I just tell them, I don't care if you like teamwork. I don't care what you're going to do as a job. You're going to have to work with people. Even if you're a writer up in the mountain, in your cabin, you're going to have to talk to your editor. You're going to have to talk to your publisher. Like, you have to talk to other people. And so I'll even have them talk about instances in their jobs where they work with people they like and they have to work with people they don't like, but they still want to pay their bills and eat at the end of the day. So they still have to figure out how to make it work. So it's still a valuable skill. So I think that's what I got. I hope it helps.
That's great. Thank you so much. Let's see, do you want to answer some questions now or save that for after Pamela's talk? Any preference?
I don't mind either way.
Why don't we save the questions for the end, and let's shift over to our ELC director, Pamela Darling-Fazio.
Hi there. So I am talking more about the mechanical side of using groups in Canvas rather than the practicality of using it in your classroom. So of presentation, because that's what we do in the ELC. So I'm talking about teamwork using Canvas groups. Canvas groups are a great tool, and I will show you examples of Canvas groups as an instructor as well as a student, so you can kind of see what their view on it is too. So as an instructor, you can create groups in Canvas using your People tab. You can auto-enroll students where you just tell Canvas, I want 5 groups, spread them out equally, and it will do it for you. You can also do it manually where you say, I want 5 groups and I'm going to set them up this way. You can also designate a leader. You don't have to designate a leader, but you can if you want. So that goes back to where Dr. Cooper was talking. You may want to designate someone as a leader because they would never volunteer themselves as a leader. So in Canvas, it allows you to do that. When you create a group in Canvas, it provides that group with a designated space within the Canvas course. They can use that space to collaborate, to start group discussions. They can even create pages in there. So one example would be you could have your group create a page where they list out all the jobs that everyone's going to hold within the group and what those duties are going to entail. And as the instructor, you can go in there and view all group activity. So whatever they add to their group page, you're able to see it as well, which is really nice. As a student, the students can view the group list so they can see obviously who else is in their group. They can communicate directly with those people in their group when they're looking at it. They can share and store files within that group space that's created within Canvas. They can start discussions. They can send private messages to other members, generate collaborative documents. Maybe you have a Word document that you want them to all share together. They can do that using the files. Again, I mentioned creating pages and even do an announcement to their whole group. So something that would be generated out to everybody. some ideas that I kind of came up with for doing group works within Canvas, because it's not just a tool that is used online. You can have an in-person class, and for example, you're teaching biology and your students are set up in tables, that can now become a group in Canvas. You're not limited to the numbers of groups you can create in any given class. You can have 50 groups going at once and switching them up each time. So once you create a group, you don't have to use that same group for every project. You can mix it up halfway through the semester or whatever works for you. If you're teaching online, same thing. You can kind of come up with the groups however you want and do as many as you like. One of the things is to start a group discussion. You can create multiple discussion topics and assign the topic to each individual group. Or you can have a discussion and you have 4 topics listed and each group takes on 1 topic. So there's different ways that you can assign an individual assignment to just one group or to the entire class. If it is a graded group, the nice part about assigning it to just the one group is you don't have to go in and do any weird grading stuff so that the other discussions don't count toward the other groups. It automatically just gets assigned to the one group. Group projects can also be created in Canvas using the assignment tool. And again, you can assign it to an individual group so that they just do that one part. You can do peer teaching, and the other 2 presenters talked a little bit about that as well within those groups. And it's a great way for students to not only learn collaborative skills, but to have a dedicated workplace where they can put those things that they're talking about. And those are only visible to them as a group and to you as the instructor. So other groups won't see what they're working on, and they can kind of then, maybe like you mentioned, Dr. Gunter, pitting them against each other. They can use that workspace in Canvas to come up with their arguments and come up with their ideas that they want to finalize. And I just wanted to talk about some best practices. I definitely want to have some time here at the end to show you exactly what I'm talking about. And you'll see this when we go into Canvas, but Canvas uses groups on the global level. So it's on the account level. So when a student goes to look at groups using the navigation on the global side where they have dashboard, courses, all that, it will say the group name. So if they're in 2 classes that you use groups and each one calls it group 1, it's going to say group 1. They're not going to know which is their English group 1 and which is their history group 1 unless you use a descriptive name when you're creating that group. Once they go into the course, they'll see it, but from the outside, they're not sure. So again, groups are on the account level, not on the individual course level necessarily. I always recommend giving very clear directions about what your intent is with the group. Why are you creating the group? And that also goes back to explaining what the advantages of a group are. Like Dr. Cooper mentioned, you're going to have to work with other people at some point in your life. And in today's age, it may be a very online environment that you're working in. So you need to know how to do that online, how to share information, because something that you say in person comes across very differently in a discussion board. So how do you make that articulate so that it makes sense and that you're not hurting someone's feelings or you're overstepping your bounds? It's a good idea to set a preliminary deadline when you're doing some sort of a group project, just to make sure that students are on track and that they're doing what they need to do, so that you don't have the day before the assignments due, 3 of the 4 members coming to you and saying, yeah, we don't have anything ready. And it's a mess then. So always setting kind of a preliminary deadline, and that deadline can be a very simple project. It can be coming up with a timeline for the group. It can be coming up with the basis of your argument. It can be coming up with the roles that the students are going to hold in the group, whatever that might be. It can be graded or ungraded. If it's going to be a part of a larger project, then maybe you have that set up as an assignment group in Canvas, and there's different parts that they submit throughout the course. Creating a rubric. Rubrics are really beneficial for students. The ELC is actually partnering with Dr. Boyer I think we're in April. We're going to do a combined workshop about rubrics. Dr. Boyer is going to talk about why you should be using rubrics in your classes. And then Brad Hennigan, our senior designer, is going to again kind of go into the mechanical side of how to create a rubric in Canvas. Canvas rubrics can be used over and over. So you can have one discussion rubric that you use in 5 discussions over 10 semesters. It's not something you do one time and it's one and done. But rubrics are a good way for students to have a very clear idea of how you're going to be looking at this group project, because sometimes with groups, there's a little ambiguity. one student might hear one thing and another hears another. So providing something that's very concrete will help them to be able to come together. And maybe letting them come up with a rubric would be a possible option within a group. Again, I talked about providing multi-part assignments, very easy to do. Adding a reflection at the end, and it's just an option for students to kind of talk about what they thought of the group. Canvas also allows you to do anonymous surveys, so they don't have to be graded and they can be anonymous. So students don't have to put their name out there and say, you know, my group was horrible, I couldn't stand the asshole of the group, or whatever it may be. So having that option to be able to do some sort of reflection just lets students have a little bit more of a voice. Again, being transparent about why you're using that group. And then you have to have some flexibility. You have to be able to allow students to maybe function a little differently. You might set these groups up at the beginning of the semester, and all of a sudden there's one group that two people are participating out of 5. So maybe you need to do some reshuffling, which can also happen in Canvas. You can dissolve a group and move those people into somewhere else. You know, there's lots of different options. Or maybe you just build new groups for the next part of the assignment. And then I would not be doing my job if I did not promote the ELC. So we are here for you. We support both students, faculty, and staff via phone, email, in person, online Zoom. If anyone's never used our online Zoom, it is really a great option. We literally have an instructional designer sitting in a Zoom room Monday through Friday, 9 to noon and 2 to 5. And you just kind of pop in there. If you're in the waiting room, it's because they're helping someone else. If someone's waiting in the waiting room, we ask that you limit 15 minutes, but otherwise we're there to help. But we can also make a separate Zoom appointment with you. If you want to go into something in more detail, you can also come into one of our campus locations and meet with us there, phone and email. You can also give our information to your students. We are there for them as well. They can walk into our campus and get help. We can do a Zoom with them. They can give us a call. They can do an email, whatever works for them. All right, so let me back out of here and show you Canvas. All right, so you see my screen there, okay, for Canvas? So I am a teacher in my Sandbox course, and I am a student in another staff member's Sandbox course so that I can show you what it looks like on the student side as well. So if I go to the groups icon over here in the global, we call this the global navigation. If I go here to the groups at the account level, you can see these very generic group names. So ELC, I don't know which courses these are for necessarily. I can go into all groups and there it will tell me where the group is coming from. So that's a little more helpful. But if they had named these groups, you know, English 1301 group 2, it would make a lot more sense for me that way. So I'm going to go ahead and go into this as a student. So let's see if this is the right one. No, let me go into the other one. She added me to a couple groups so we could test this out. So this is what the group space looks like for the students. It looks very similar to a Canvas course. It tells me up here at the top which course I'm in and that I'm in part of group 2. I have a home page, which is my announcements and activity. I can view announcements. So if a student in the group has posted an announcement to the group, I can see it in here. And this is where the students can create their own pages. So they could create a page in here that they can add content to. It has a little rich content editor. I'll show you that when we go into the instructor view. It has a rich content editor where they can add images, text, format the text, do all of that. I can see the other people that are in the group. So these are the group members, and then these are the teachers in the course. And you know, this also is a link, so I can go directly to that person as well. There are discussions. So here are discussions that have been assigned to this group. I can also create my own discussion over here. And I mentioned that you can have files, so students can store their own files within a group folder. And these are accessible to everyone that is in this group. Big Blue Button is a conferencing tool that students can use that's integrated into Canvas. It's a little bit wonky. The only group that really uses it is our music department. And the problem with Big Blue Button is got a limited number of users on it. So if someone new comes on and we're at max, it'll just kick someone off. So we do recommend that students don't necessarily use Big Blue Button, and they can always do a Zoom free account if they want to meet that way. There's also a collaborations option here where they can add files and collaborate on a document. So then let me go back to my dashboard and I'll show you what it looks like as the instructor who sets up a group. So this is my sandbox. And to access my groups, I can go down to the people tab. I do not have people visible to this course because they can get to groups just from the homepage when groups are set up. But here you can see where I've done descriptive names for my group. So the name of my course, group set 1. So these are 2 different sets of groups. All of the students in my class are in each group set. So this is where I was saying, you could have 16 different group sets and every week you have a new group. So you create the group set and then you create the groups within the group set. So in this group here, I have a leader and then there's a total of 4 students. So this is the leader of the group. These other groups do not have a leader assigned. If I go into the group, I can see who's actually in that group. And then if I click over here, I can visit their homepage. So this is, as the instructor, I'm now going into the page that they created, their workspace that they can view. And from this area, I can go into any group's homepage. These are the 3 groups that were part of that group set. So when I'm in their homepage, I can view any announcements they have. I can look at the pages that they've created. So I can see here that Bridget created a page. I can take a look at that. There's nothing on it. I can see the page that Andrea created. She dropped a picture into here, talking about California, the things she misses and doesn't miss. Again, I can look at the people. I can see any kind of discussion that they've had going on. Look at the files if they've uploaded anything. We have some uploaded media because she uploaded those images. So those 2 images that she added to the page had to be uploaded and they end up here in the files as well. Again, only the group has access to these files. And then let me go back to the other group and show you. So if I'm back in Ophelia's sandbox where I am a student, you can see over here, I can get to my groups as well. I don't have to use that global navigation. So once I'm in the course, I can go into group 2. And if I wanted to create my own page as a student, I just go to pages, add a new page. And I have this rich content editor that faculty are all very comfortable with. I can bold text, I can format it any way I like. I can add an image, I can add a document actually as well. You can upload a document into here. Just find one on my desktop. Might take a little while to upload because it's a larger file, but you get the idea. Students can have all that access as well. They can add any pages, comments, discussions, whatever works for them. That was a lot. And that's why I gave you the contact info for the ELC, because if you do want to do more with groups and create them within your courses and you need some help, come to our Zoom, make an appointment with us. We also have some documents from Canvas Instructure. Canvas has amazing, let me show you our ELC website just so you get an idea here. So on the ELC homepage, there is a link to the Canvas guides and links, and there's all kinds of information on here, and there's actually one about groups. So groups overview. You can also find information for students that if you do create groups, you may want to share one of these Canvas guides for students on how they as a student can use a group so that they are using it to the fullest potential as well. But that's available on the ELC website. Okay, that was a lot and I know I talk fast. Allison's used to me though.
We do have one question for you, Pamela, from Russell, who asks, if you allow pages, does that allow the students to see the pages you created for lectures?
They would not see those in the group. They would see the pages that you create in the regular Canvas course if you've enabled pages or if you've added the pages to the modules. Students in their group will only see the pages that are created by the group members. You as the instructor are a group member though. So you could create pages within there, but you wouldn't necessarily want to add a lecture page unless you added to all of them.
Mhm.
What other questions do you all have for our 3 expert panelists here today? For Dr. Gunter, Dr. Cooper, for Director Darling Fazio. They gave us some really great ideas and tips today about teaching with groups. While we are waiting to see if any questions arise, Pamela was advertising the ELC, so I'm going to advertise the CTL a little bit. If you are interested in spending a little more time thinking about group formation for more long-term projects and how to create really cohesive groups, I've got another webinar in that coming up next week on Tuesday the 28th from 3 to 4. And I'll have some additional resources and materials that you can use with your students related to that kind of group cohesion process. I'm going to send out a flyer about it probably tomorrow, but as always, you can register for that on the CTL events page, which I just put in the chat. So hope to see you there. Here's a question from Ebony. Is it more beneficial to use groups with online versus in-person classes? Where does the weight of the benefit lay? It's a great question. Any thoughts from our panelists?
I don't think it's more beneficial. I think there's benefits to both, but I'll let the other 2 panelists talk on that.
I think it's even more beneficial in an online class because you, especially an asynchronous online class, you do feel kind of like this anonymous entity going through the class. And so having it in the online setting, at least they start interacting even asynchronously with these same students each week. And so it's a way to kind of start building some camaraderie and like they end up having their little study groups, even though they're not getting the in-person like chatting before class and kind of putting 2 and 2 together of like, oh, I want to ask that person for help or such. So it works well in person, but I think it's even more important online.
Hi.
Yeah, I agree.
Can I ask another question? So I have students that they're actually already have discussions and they have to comment on 2 peers. So how would I like extend that and then maybe like take 1 week of their 16 weeks of discussions and make it more of a group project? Can you give an example of how that might work?
You want more of a mechanical example of how it would work or?
Well, I'm not really sure like how, if they're already doing a discussion, they're already commenting on peers, how could I make it so that I could incorporate it as a group and it still work so that they're still doing their individual discussion at the end of it?
With groups and discussions, you could assign a topic to a group, but that group would only then post on that individual discussion if you assign it just to the group. So it wouldn't really branch the entire class. I really think that group projects and assignments are more beneficial using Canvas groups than discussions, because unless you have a very large class, you don't necessarily want to limit your discussion to just one group, unless it's like a precursor to a larger assignment where you want the group talking about something so they can maybe debate it later on.
The strategy that you're talking about, to me, would work really well with using like a jigsaw group or a fishbowl kind of strategy, both of which I'm going to be talking about in March if anybody's interested in that. But like Pamela was saying, just for what it's worth, I could see you using those individual group discussions, and then you could use, you could kind of review them as an instructor and then take some of those points back to the class to encourage students from those groups to share out with the rest of the class after they've kind of had that chance to practice.
Yeah, I've
Okay.
done the discussion where only one group is assigned a discussion, but it's actually for a kind of different reason. And so it's really interesting seeing all the stuff that you had to show, Pamela, because I agree with what y'all are saying. I think it's even more beneficial for online classes to have that teamwork aspect. And I've been teaching online for over 10 years, but I still don't feel very comfortable in integrating that. And so part of it is because over those years, I was at different schools and having to learn different programs, and you get comfortable with one just in time to switch to another one. And so thankfully, you know, we've had Canvas for a while, and I'm finally getting comfortable with what I've got, and then going to you guys and asking, how do I do this? But I have a class where I call it the Choose Your Adventure class. And so it's three main kind of common ways to teach English 1301. And at the beginning of the semester, I let the student choose which one they want. And the only way I've been able to get the discussion aspect to work so that it didn't look like they were having to do 3 different discussions was by using the groups. But that's the only time they really work as a group. So it's not like everyone who chose this adventure, y'all get together and talk. It's really more of, I want them to be able to discuss things that are pertinent to what they chose. And so all the other assignments were easy to just have a Dropbox, and I know how to like organize that. But the discussions, I didn't want them to think I have to do 3 discussions this week. So I just put them into those groups like you were talking about. And then I just assign that discussion to people in that group. But I also didn't know that this whole time it just said project groups on their computer, because I have the little mini ones under, and it's like, y'all are the Godzillas and y'all are the heroes, blah, blah. I thought they saw that. And so while you were talking about it, I was like quickly changing it to like English 1 adventures. So like, there's just so much to learn. And once we get it figured out, I think we could do a lot of good for our students.
And the nice thing too about creating those pages is, and anything in there, it has that rich content editor in Canvas. Students can actually create a video right there directly on that page if that's part of what you want them to do, you know, so they can communicate with each other that way. It has all of the same tools as any other kind of open window like that.
I was just going to add, you were talking about having a group project, but with individual grades. That is how Perusal is set up. So it doesn't give you a group grade. Each person earns their grade going through. And you don't just have to do it with written word. You can put podcasts in there. You could put YouTube clips, movies, documentaries, however you want to do it. And then as they move through that media, they'll see the other students' comments on that section and they can reply. So if there is something that maybe doesn't work well for a regular like text discussion, but would work better in that format, it's an option.
What else? Any other questions for our presenters today? Well, I don't know about y'all. I took a lot of notes, wrote down some great ideas, and I learned a lot of things about what you can do in Canvas that I had no idea about. Yeah, I put in the chat earlier, like that tip about using the descriptive group names. So helpful. Like I had no idea, like you were saying, that they weren't differentiated by course when students see them. So, so great. Well, thank you everybody for being here today. Thank you to Dr. Gunter and Dr. Cooper and Director Darling Facio for sharing their expertise with us today. I have recorded this session, so if you want to revisit anything, I'll be posting a link on the CTL recordings page within the next few days. And I hope that you will join us again as part of this CTL COAT Teamwork series for some of our additional workshops that are coming in the future. So thanks everybody for being here, and have a great rest of your day.
Too, and they can bully each other. Again, it depends on the purpose and what it is that I'm really trying to do. Again, with commonalities and personalities, you know, when we do icebreakers, they tell us things they like and don't like. And I'm also kind of making like a weird little map in my head of like, okay, these three would probably work well together. I'm going to keep these two super far apart from each other. Every time I get done with a class, if I can, I go to my office and I rewrite those notes that I took on those students. And then I go to the seating chart on the attendance thing of Canvas, and I kind of quiz myself as I'm like looking at their names. I'm trying to picture them each individually. So, because, you know, we don't see them sometimes. If it's a Monday, Wednesday class, you leave Wednesday, you don't see them again until Monday. That's a pretty big stretch when we're seeing so many faces. But it is worth it, especially when you're trying to do teamwork, because those kinds of teams, especially for long-term teams, they tend to work a lot better than some of the others. Something I've done before is I'll write different categories on the board, and I'll have them write names on Post-it notes and then put their Post-it note in the category that they want. And it'll be categories like anime, Stranger Things, music, podcasts, get out.